At approximately 12:58 in the afternoon on Sunday, July 26, 2009, a phone rang in Warren Hance's car. The caller ID showed his sister Diane's number. But when he answered, the voice on the line was not his sister's. It was his 8-year-old daughter Emma, calling from the back of the minivan her aunt was driving north toward Long Island. Emma told her father that something was wrong with Aunt Diane, that she was having trouble seeing, that she wasn't speaking clearly, that the other children were upset. Warren Hance told Emma to keep Diane on the road. He told her he was coming. He would meet them. He began driving toward the Taconic State Parkway immediately. Then Diane got on the phone. She told her brother she was disoriented, that her vision was foggy, that she did not feel right. He told her to pull over and stay where she was. He was on his way. By the time Diane Schuler disconnected the call, she was already driving south on the northbound lanes of the Taconic State Parkway. She had entered through an exit ramp near Briarcliff Manor. She was traveling at between 65 and 85 miles per hour. 5 children were in the minivan with her: her 5-year-old son Bryan, her 2-year-old daughter Erin, and Warren's 3 daughters: Emma, 8, Alyson, 7, and Katie, 5. Multiple drivers approaching from the correct direction swerved out of her path. Several called 911. The recordings of those calls still exist. They are the sound of ordinary people encountering something impossible, frightened voices, urgent and disbelieving, reporting a vehicle that showed no sign of awareness, no deceleration, no response to the horns and headlights, and desperate evasions of everyone in its path. For 1.7 miles, the minivan drove south on the northbound lanes of the Taconic State Parkway. At 1:35 p.m., it struck a Chevrolet Trailblazer head-on. The Trailblazer was carrying 3 men: Michael Bastardi, 81 years old, his son Guy Bastardi, 49, and their friend Daniel Longo, 74. All 3 were killed on impact. Diane Schuler was killed. Erin, 2 years old, was killed. Emma and Alyson Hance were killed. Katie Hance, 5 years old, survived the initial impact but died at the hospital later that day. Bryan Schuler, 5 years old, survived. He suffered broken bones and severe head trauma. He was hospitalized for several weeks. He was the only passenger in the minivan to come home. 8 people died on a Sunday afternoon on the Taconic State Parkway. It was the worst accident on that road in over 75 years. And the question of why, the question of what was happening inside that minivan in the 70 minutes between the Hunter Lake campground and the moment Diane Schuler entered the wrong lane, has never been fully, satisfactorily answered. Diane Schuler was born on November 13, 1972, in Floral Park, New York, a working-class suburban community on Long Island. She was the eldest child and only daughter of Warren Hance Sr. and Eileen Hance. She had 3 younger brothers. When Diane was 9 years old, her mother left. She walked out of the family and did not come back. Her brothers eventually re-established contact with their mother as they grew older. Diane never did. She cut the relationship entirely and, according to everyone who knew her throughout her adult life, never spoke about it. Not in any meaningful way. Not to her husband. Not to her closest friends. The abandonment was a wound that she had sealed over so completely that the people who loved her most had almost no access to it. What filled the space her mother left was control. Diane stepped into the role of woman of the house as a 9-year-old child, managing, organizing, taking care. She was described by everyone who knew her as sharp, capable, and fiercely competent. If she said she would do something, it was done. If there was a problem, Diane handled it. She did not ask for help. She did not let people into the parts of herself that were struggling. She presented, always, the version of herself that was in control. She graduated from high school, briefly attended Nassau Community College, and built a successful corporate career at Cablevision, where she was the director of billing and collections. She met her husband Daniel at a friend's wedding. They married in 1999. They had 2 children, Bryan, born 2004, and Erin, born 2006. They lived in West Babylon, Long Island. They went camping every summer. Diane took care of everything. People who worked with her described her as hardworking, reliable, and thorough. Friends described her as devoted to her children, completely in control of her household, and not someone who would ever put a child at risk. Her brother Warren described her as an amazing mom and an incredible aunt. Her husband Daniel called her a perfect wife and mother. The HBO documentary There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane, directed by Liz Garbus and aired in 2011, offered a more complex picture. The film drew on interviews with people who knew Diane and suggested that beneath the control and the competence was someone who had never processed the abandonment she experienced at 9 years old. Someone who had been holding everything together since childhood and had found, at some point, a private way to stop. A psychiatrist interviewed for the film said that when trauma of that kind goes unacknowledged and unprocessed, it does not disappear. It finds another way out. Friends of Diane told the documentary's team that she smoked marijuana at night to help her sleep, that she did not generally drink heavily, but that the vodka bottle in the minivan, a bottle the Schuler family confirmed belonged to them, a bottle they kept on camping trips, was not unusual to have around. What remains unknown, what everyone who has examined this case cannot establish from the outside, is what happened in those 70 minutes. The Schuler and Hans families had spent the weekend at Hunter Lake Campground in Parksville, in the Catskill Mountains. It was a regular family trip, the kind they took every summer. Daniel Schuler left separately that morning. He drove home on his own. Diane was to follow in the Ford Windstar, carrying both their children and Warren's 3 daughters. At 9:30 a.m., Diane left the campground. She appeared fine to the campground staff, who saw her off. No one who spoke to her that morning described anything unusual in her behavior or appearance. At some point in the following hours, something changed. At 11:37 a.m., Jackie Hance, Warren's wife and the mother of the 3 girls in the van, called Diane to check on their progress. Diane said they were delayed by traffic. She did not sound slurred or distressed. Jackie noticed nothing out of the ordinary. That was the last normal conversation anyone had with Diane Schuler. Between 11:37 a.m. and 12:58 p.m., 79 minutes, something happened inside that vehicle. Witnesses along the route would later describe seeing the minivan weaving in and out of lanes on the New York State Thruway before reaching the Taconic. Someone reported seeing a woman vomiting by the side of the road. A gas station stop was identified on surveillance footage. Diane had apparently stopped looking for pain relief medication, possibly for a toothache that Daniel Schuler mentioned she had been experiencing in the days before the crash. The theory that the HBO documentary explored, and that some in the Schuler family reached for as an alternative to the toxicology results, was that Diane had an infected tooth, that she had attempted to self-medicate the pain with the vodka bottle that was present in the vehicle, that she had not anticipated the interaction with the THC already in her system, and that the combination had incapacitated her in ways she did not foresee. This theory does not require Diane Schuler to be an alcoholic. It does not require her to be the reckless drunk that some commentators branded her. It requires only that on one specific afternoon, in a moment of private pain management, things spiraled in a way she could not control. The toxicology does not dispute this possibility. It does not confirm it either. What the toxicology confirms is that at the time of the crash, Diane Schuler had a blood alcohol level of 0.19, the equivalent of approximately 10 drinks, with a further 6 grams of unabsorbed alcohol still in her stomach. She had THC levels consistent with cannabis use within 15 to 60 minutes of the crash. She had not had a stroke. She had not suffered a heart attack or aneurysm. The autopsy found no underlying medical emergency that explained her driving. She was drunk and impaired. The question of whether she knew, whether she chose, whether she tried to stop, those questions died with her on the Taconic at 1:35 p.m. The recording of Warren Hance's voice on the 911 call he made after speaking to his daughter has been described by people who have heard it as one of the most distressing recordings in the case. He tells the dispatcher that his sister is driving the wrong way on the Taconic, that his 3 daughters are in the vehicle, that his sister called him and was disoriented, that he is driving toward the parkway, that there are children in the car. He is driving toward his daughters. He arrives at the scene after the crash. Warren and Jackie Hance lost all 3 of their daughters on July 26, 2009. Emma was 8. Alyson was 7. Katie was 5. They were the children in the back of the van who were not wearing seatbelts. The children the Westchester County Medical Examiner determined were killed because they were not secured in car seats. In the years that followed, Warren Hance came to accept the toxicology results. He accepted what the evidence told him about how his daughters died. It was, by his own account, an agonizing process, moving from a place of grief and love for his sister to a place of reckoning with what she had done. "How does a person go from being like a sister to me," Jackie Hance told a journalist, "to being the one who ruined our lives?" The Hance family established the Hance Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization supporting self-esteem programs for young girls, named for Emma, Alyson, and Katie. In 2012, Warren and Jackie welcomed another daughter, a child born into a family that had been torn open and had found, slowly and painfully, a way to keep going. Daniel Schuler did not reconcile with the evidence in the same way. Daniel Schuler's public position never wavered. In the weeks after the crash, when the toxicology results were released, he gave national television interviews in which he stated flatly that his wife did not drink, that he had never seen her drunk in the years they had been together, that the results were wrong, or contaminated, or the product of an error that had not yet been found. He hired a private investigator, Tom Ruskin, a former New York City detective. He commissioned independent testing of preserved samples from the autopsy. He explored the possibility of exhuming Diane's body to conduct a hair follicle test that might establish her drug history. He filed lawsuits against the state of New York, alleging the highway was poorly designed, and against Warren Hance, in whose name the minivan had been registered. Tom Ruskin, the investigator Daniel hired, eventually told the press, "She was drunk and high at the time of the accident that killed 7 innocent people. If she was alive today, Diane would likely be in jail." Daniel Schuler's own hired investigator reached the same conclusion as the Westchester County Medical Examiner. Daniel Schuler maintained his position regardless. The independent toxicology testing confirmed the original findings. The New York State Police issued their final report in June 2010, 11 months after the crash, upholding every previous conclusion. Every official and independent examination of the evidence reached the same place. Daniel Schuler has not changed his position. The HBO documentary, which aired in July 2011 on the 2nd anniversary of the crash, gave Daniel and his sister-in-law Jay Schuler extended time on screen to make their case. The film presented the evidence clearly and gave space to both positions. Critics noted that the documentary's title, taken from the words of the 8-year-old girl who called her father from the back of the van, contained the answer the film's central subject refused to accept. Michael Bastardi Jr., the son of Guy Bastardi, who lost his father and grandfather in the crash, watched the documentary and found no comfort in it. He said Schuler's family continued to make excuses. He said the film confirmed that the people who should have been accountable were still searching for someone else to blame. The Diane Schuler case sits in an unusual position in the landscape of true crime. There is no perpetrator who survived to be questioned, tried, and sentenced. There is no courtroom narrative. There is only a toxicology report, a crash reconstruction, a broken vodka bottle, and a husband who sits across from those findings every day and says they are wrong. What the case leaves behind is a question about the gap between the person other people know and the person living inside a private struggle that nobody was allowed to see. The woman who was abandoned at 9 and never told anyone how it felt. The woman who held everything together so completely that the people who loved her had no idea what it cost. The woman who found something, at some point, in some measure, in some private ritual of relief. that let her stop holding for a while. Whether that relief became a dependency, whether it was situational, whether the morning of July 26th was a catastrophic anomaly or the culmination of something that had been building, none of that can be established from the outside now. Because the only person who could answer it died on the Taconic at 1:35 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. What can be established? What two independent laboratories, a state police investigation, an autopsy, and every official examination confirmed, is that Diane Schuler drove the wrong way on the Taconic State Parkway with 5 children in her vehicle at a blood alcohol level of 0.19, with THC in her system, without a medical emergency to explain her driving. And that 8 people died as a result. Erin Schuler was 2 years old. Emma Hance was 8. Alyson was 7. Katie was 5. Michael Bastardi Sr. was 81 years old. His son Guy was 49. Daniel Longo was 74. Bryan Schuler was 5 years old. He is the only one who survived and will carry whatever he remembers, or doesn't remember, or has been told, for the rest of his life. There is a specific cruelty in a case that cannot be resolved. Most true crime cases, however terrible, arrive at some form of conclusion. An arrest, a trial, a verdict, a sentence, a moment in which the legal system draws a line under what happened and says, this is what we know, and this is what we have decided. The Diane Schuler case has none of that. There is no perpetrator to prosecute. There is no verdict to deliver. There is only a dead woman, 8 dead people, a 5-year-old boy who survived, a husband who refuses the evidence, and a brother who accepted what it told him and built a foundation in his daughter's names from the wreckage of what it meant. The question that pulls people back to this case again and again is not the toxicology. The toxicology is settled. It has been confirmed twice by 2 independent laboratories. The question is the gap between the Diane Schuler that everyone describes and the Diane Schuler who was behind the wheel of that minivan. Between the woman who never asked for help and the woman who, at some point that Sunday morning in the Catskills, needed it desperately and found something else instead. Her mother left when she was 9 years old. She never spoke about it. She held everything together instead. She held it together for 27 years, for her brothers, for her father, for her husband, for her children, for the nieces who loved her, for the colleagues who relied on her, for the image of the woman who had everything under control. And then, on a Sunday afternoon on the Taconic State Parkway, 1.7 miles from the end, she didn't.